the focal point of Jesus' ministry in terms of location. And so we didn't get all the way around that, but I decided, no, we've only got like 7 weeks left. And so what I'm going to do, we will just go to the various sites around it as we continue to talk about the life and the ministry of Christ. And so, because we don't have a lot of time. So what we're going to go today, and I was going to try to fit 2 in, and the more I prepared for this, I said, no, I don't think I can fit 2 in, so we'll just do 1. And if we end a little early, that will be fine, but we probably won't end a little bit early. So, we are up in the Galilee, and that is where in the northwestern corner of the Sea of Galilee is about where 70% of the ministry and the miracles of Christ take place. So there's a big concentration of that area. We talked about the population concentration last week on the Sea of Galilee. And I told you that, a lot of times people go, why did Jesus go to such a remote spot for his ministry? And the answer is, it's not a remote spot at all. It wasn't in the first century. The Sea of Galilee was a very concentrated population. If you were here, you remember me perhaps saying that it's been estimated based on archaeology and all that the population of that area around the time of Christ, or the villages and cities around the Sea of Galilee, was probably about 200,000. And to put that in perspective, the population of the Herodian Empire was probably less than 1 million. So probably 20 to 25% of the population lived around the Sea of Galilee because it was such an important place. Of course, the major trade route that connected Europe and Asia and Africa ran right along the Sea of Galilee, went through Capernaum. And so it was a very populated place. Now, in terms of today, there still certainly were remote areas, and especially given the fact that travel was largely by foot. And so you could be in some pretty remote areas then that aren't so remote today. But nevertheless, so Jesus went to an important population center where international traffic is going through. People are going to be exposed to Christ and the ministry of Christ, even as they go take their journeys down into Africa and Asia and Europe. And so it's going to really set the stage then for the beginning of the growth of the church. But so as we take our journey today, as we go back up into the Galilee today, we're going to go to Magdala. And I've mentioned Magdala last week. I mentioned Magdala. We just did a couple of shots of it. I said we'll be coming back to it and we'll be looking at closer. If you were here with us last week, you recognize that picture. What that is a picture of the harbors that have been discovered around the Sea of Galilee in the time of Jesus. It gives us an indication of just how populated the area was around the Sea of Galilee. There's at least 16 ancient ports, harbors, that were found that date back to Roman times, all around this body of water that's 13 miles long at its longest point, that's 8 miles wide at its widest point. And so you've got you can see the significance of that. We zeroed in on the top portion of it, the northern portion of it, especially the northwestern portion of it. That is, of course, in this corner right here. You can see Capernaum, which we've already been to in our class, and that was Jesus' home base for his Galilean ministry. Now we are going down here to Magdala. So as we get ready to go to Magdala, let's just kind of jump in on it. This is, of course, an aerial view of Magdala. You can see, of course, the Sea of Galilee here, and this is ancient Magdala. That hotel, if you've been with us, there's a hotel that's built on the site today. That's a relatively new hotel. It's the hotel that we first stayed in back in 2023. It is the hotel that we're going to stay in April this year as well. There is another perspective of it. We saw this last week when we looked at Magdala, the cliffs of Arbel that overlook it up here. And then this is right here was where the ancient port was. They have found remains of the harbor there. And of course, you can see the hotel there in the background. And that hotel, as I've mentioned before and we're about to see, is built over the site of ancient Magdala. Now, here is a shot. We're just west of the hotel. You can see the hotel there. And it is looking east across the Sea of Galilee. This is where the old harbor was at Magdala. And if you look right here, you can see the excavations. I mentioned the story. I'll mention it again. It was in 2006 that a Catholic organization based in Jerusalem bought this land. I can't even imagine how much they paid for the land along the Sea of Galilee. There's not a lot of land along the Sea of Galilee. And so that's prime real estate. But they bought this land, and anytime that construction is done in an archaeological zone, the Israeli Antiquities Authority has to come in and they do they kind of like do boreholes to see if there's anything underneath. By the way, you say, well, what's an archaeological zone in Israel? Israel is an archaeological zone. The whole country is an archaeological zone, but particularly around the Sea of Galilee. And so that was in 2006. This Catholic organization wanted to build a guest house for pilgrims, people who come to visit the Holy Land. And that was kind of the dream. And lo and behold, the dream was put on hold because they dug down, and one of the first things they hit was a synagogue. And we're going to see that synagogue in just a minute. And so everything was put on hold for a while. And so that was 2006. 2009, the excavations began. And they have excavated a market area, a synagogue, and a residential area. And then the hotel opened. It's probably been open about 5 years. And so it was finally done. There's still things that they're doing. I don't know, maybe in the last 3 years they were doing a new dining room. I don't know if it's finished or not, but continuing to do some things there. But it's a very interesting story. By the way, from an archaeologist perspective, it's the only archaeological site, I believe it's the only archaeological site that is directed by Mexican archaeologists. And the 3 lead archaeologists are all female. And so that's kind of rare that you have Mexican archaeological lead and all-female archaeological lead that has been responsible. They still dig there. It is still an ongoing live archaeological zone and site, an excavation site. And so about 3 months of the year, people come over, and you can volunteer for things like this and go over and spend a week or two excavating. And so they continue to excavate here in Magdala. This is a view, a different angle here. What we have here, as we look at it, you can see the hotel here is under construction. So it's just like a one concrete wing at this point. So this is, probably about 10 years ago that this is happening. But under this canopy right here, we're going to take a closer look at it here in a minute, is the synagogue. Right here is the ancient marketplace. Right here is a residential area. And there's a couple of more. The residential area also continues down east a little bit. So as we think about Magdala and as we think about the city of Magdala during the time of Christ, and that's looking directly down into, this is the marketplace, and you can see the synagogue right over here on the edge, and this is a residential zone, and we're going to see some particular things in each of those zones in just a minute. But as far as the city goes, Magdala, sometimes you'll see it called Migdal. And Migdal is Hebrew, Magdala is Aramaic. They both mean tower. But of all of the harbors around the Sea of Galilee, Magdala was the largest in Jesus' day. It was a place where fish would be brought by the fishermen. Now, of course, a lot of the fishermen would keep a lot of their catch. They would sell some of it in their own markets around the Sea of Galilee. But if you had excess, you would come to Magdala. And Magdala was a place where they processed and pickled fish. When Jesus feeds the 5,000 and the little boy pulls out 2 fish, the word for fish there is a pickled fish, a fish that had been through processed. And there's a good chance that he got it here in Magdala because this is where fish would have been pickled, processed, and also shipped, because in order to be shipped, it had to be pickled. And so Magdala was a significant site. We don't really know what happened to it, but it kind of disappeared in 67 AD. In other words, about 35 years or so after the time of Christ, it just disappeared. There's a couple of theories. In 66 AD, of course, the Romans came and destroyed Jerusalem. There was a big rebellion. There was a big Jewish force here in Galilee that tried to take on the Romans. They were impotent against the Romans. There were some sea battles on the Sea of Galilee. Some of the Galileans there, made their ships into, as best they could, into some kind of combat vessel, but it was no match for the Romans. And so it could be that Magdala, because especially that it was kind of a leading center and city, that in 67 it just, that the Romans just wiped it out. And then just over time, sediment and all, because of its place there along the Sea of Galilee, just kind of covered it up. But there are several archaeologists who look at the geology of the area and think that's really more what happened, not so much the destruction by the Romans, but more of a natural destruction based on where it's sitting. And but what we do know is there's nothing, when it was started to be excavated, there was nothing, no coins or anything found there that was later than 67 AD. And in fact, there was a coin found in the synagogue, and the coin was just, it said on it, remember when Jesus had a coin and said, whose image and inscription is this? And they said, well, it's Caesar's. He said, well, give the Caesar what's Caesar's. So on this particular coin, it said Herod Antipas, and it said Tiberias. Tiberias is the city just south that Herod Antipas, the one Jesus called the fox, he built that city to honor the Roman Emperor Tiberius. And so it was minted there by Herod Antipas, and so we know it's a first century synagogue. It was there during the time of Jesus. But so it was a big city in terms of, nothing like Jerusalem or anything, but probably had a few thousand residents, which would have been a big city in that time. And it was a major market area. It actually was on that road. I told you the road, the Via Maris, that ran through Capernaum. It actually came down the coast, the western coast of the Sea of Galilee, and also ran through Magdala. And at Magdala, there was a turn, and it turned off then to go to the west and eventually over to the coast and down the coast of Israel. So Magdala was on the Via Maris, so the major trade route, major manufacturing center, and so it was a significant city in Jesus' day. Okay, you see that little circle up there? That's in the marketplace. That area is in the marketplace. We know it was a marketplace for a couple of reasons. First of all, the streets that run, here's one of the major streets, and then also here would have been a street that ran in front of the synagogue. These buildings only open to those streets. And so we know it's not residential housing, it is market. And so you have that. Most of these rooms, there's two parts to it. There's a front area and then there's a back room. And again, no access in the back room except from the front entrance of the street. And so this is how shops were in the time of Christ. The shop would be in the front, the warehouse would be in the back. Whoever was the shop owner kept his wares in the back. And so we kind of get a sense here of some of the things that were made during the time of Christ. By the way, that would be in, hold on a second here. It's that area right there. You can see as you're looking at the synagogue, the covered portion of the synagogue there, you can see how close this market. But I'm highlighting here one particular shop. You can see that little mark on it there. By the way, here is, again, here's the street. This is the opening from the street. This is where the shop would have been. This is where the warehouse space would have been. But in this particular shop, what was found were these little glass vials. And we know, based on the testing and all of these vials, it was a couple of different things were sold in this particular shop. Cosmetics, women's cosmetics were sold in this shop, and also some medicines. And so it was a makeup store and a pharmacy and they were in these little, beautiful little glass vials and bottles. And so we get an indication there of what was in that particular shop right there. Also, that one right there you can see that really fronts the synagogue. I want to zero in on that now as we look at it. And there it is. You can see how close it is to the synagogue, right against it. Jesus would have walked right by that. I have absolutely no doubt. These streets, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But if you look here now at what I was highlighting, I'm highlighting these things right here. And you can see this one especially well. That's a deep, it looks like it's about 3 feet deep. And you say, what in the world is that? And there's a few of them lined up here. Here's one as well. They're not ritual baths. We'll see some ritual baths, Jewish ritual baths in a minute. What these are, this is where fish would have been collected. As the catch would be brought in, there would be places like this in the market where people could get fresh fish that would be caught. There were other things like this that were involved, vats like this that were involved in the processing and the pickling of the fish. And so this shows that this particular shop was a fish dealer. And so there again is even a better view. You can see these tubs. Inside the hotel there, when you go in the hotel, by the way, they have reconstructed one of those fish, and it has water in it and everything. It's really pretty. In the same style that they found in another place they found there in the excavations. And so it was a major fish processing center. That's a little road here that you get to that particular area. This is the road. This road, by the way, would have led to the harbor. And as we think about Jesus and coming to Magdala, we will, he would have come from the harbor and would have come down that road. We'll mention that in just a minute as we look at it. So let's take a look now as we now move to the other side, the residential area. And you can see what I've circled there and what I've circled there. There are Jewish ritual baths. And so this was a residential area. People had these in their homes as they would purify themselves. Maybe they were in contact with various things, travelers from other parts of the world, and, before they go in the synagogue or do any kind of ceremonial, meet the ceremonial demands of Jewish life, they would have to purify themselves. And so you see these purification pools. You say, where does the water come from? Did they put the water in there? No, actually, these are spring-fed. And so this water is still coming up and from springs around there that fed them all those years ago. So it's pretty cool, actually. You can see the steps. It looks like baptistries. And that's exactly basically what they were, Jewish ritual purification, mikvah. You can see a couple of instances here. You can see the steps that go down into the mikvah that were in these houses, and really, really, really well preserved. Okay, let's move on now to like the main event. Now, the market's really interesting. It gives you a sense of in the residential area life in the times of Christ. But this is the main event. This is a first century synagogue. As I said, we know it's first century because of the pottery remains, and it's particularly that coin that was found there from AD 67. So we know that this is a first century synagogue. We're going to take a look. Here's the aerial view of that synagogue before that pavilion was built over it, that protective structure. We're going to look at a couple of places. We're going to look at this room that is, as you enter into the synagogue this way, you're going to see this room that is called Beit Midrash, that room. It's a study hall. That's where people would gather to study the Torah, the scriptures. Then there's this, the synagogue proper, where people would gather. It's called Beit Knesset, the house of gathering, the house of assembly. The Israeli parliament, by the way, is called the Knesset. This is the Beit Knesset. Then over here, we're going to look at a particular room that is right here. And what that room is that is the place where the Torah scrolls would have been kept. It would always be kept on the wall facing Jerusalem. And so Jerusalem would be this way, south. And so we're going to see some interesting features about this particular synagogue. And so let's start then right here in the Beit Midrash, the study hall. So as you go into the study hall, and this is the study hall right here. You can see it right here. Well, I want us to focus on this particular stone. It's a really interesting stone there. And we get a close-up view of it. That's one of the three Mexican archaeologists that are in charge of the dig there. And so you can get for scale there a sense of the size of the study hall and that particular stone there. But take a look at it. What do you see on that stone that looks kind of odd, maybe? What? Yeah, two grooves, two little channels on each side. And, right here and right here. You say, what in the world were those grooves for? Well, when people would come in this room to study, and they remember Jesus was handed the scroll, and he unrolled the scroll to the area in Isaiah and read from it. What they would do is, as they would study, this kept the scroll from rolling off. You know, oh man, you roll it out, and they sit down in those slots. So this is in the Beit Midrash, the study hall of it. Now, as we move from the study hall, we'll go into the Beit Knesset. And so as we begin to go in there, we're going to see this particular thing here, but we will talk about that in a little bit. We just want to mention some of the aspects of this particular synagogue. And so let's take a look at it. This was traditional structure of a first century synagogue. This is the seventh first century synagogue that has been found in Israel, and it is the oldest of the seven that have been found. And so it really was, and when the archaeologists, by the way, that from the Israeli Antiquity Society was doing the boreholes, they came down right on top of the synagogue, and they came right down on top of that structure right there. It's like, you almost think, providence of God involved in that. It's just, right on top of that stone. That stone, by the way, that we'll look at in just a minute, that is not the original. It is an exact replica. The original is carefully stowed away, and scholars are continuing to study it right now, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. So this particular synagogue here, what people would do, you can see that there are two levels here. People would sit along this level, and then they would sit along this level. Also, around the back, there's another level of seating that would go all the way around. As you look at it, you think it can't hold very many people. It can hold about 150 people. They have found another synagogue, by the way, in Magdala. So we know there were at least two synagogues in Magdala, which gives us a sense that it was a larger population there in Magdala than a lot of the cities and villages around the Sea of Galilee. But so about 150 people could come in there. Again, you can see here, again, where they would sit. There's seating around this area back here, seating right here, and seating right here. And so that's how people would gather on the Sabbath for the Torah. You can get a sense of scale there. That's why I put this picture of her in there. It gives you a sense of the scale of the size of the synagogue. Okay, as we continue to look down at the synagogue, we want to look at this area now that I mentioned, and that is where the Torah scrolls would have been housed. A very sacred place for the Jews, and this is it right here. As you're standing here, you can see it right here. You can see the synagogue is over here. This is the room where the Torah scrolls were kept. You can probably see a little bit there. The floor was beautiful mosaics. Here's a better view of that. The mosaics that remains, that mosaic is there. It is original. It is from the time of Christ. It is from the first century. A little closer up view, you can see the little tiny tiles, mosaics. That's what a mosaic is. It's constructed of these little tiny tiles. What does this tell us about the synagogue? We're about to see a few things about it. It tells us that Magdala was the Williamson County of the Sea of Galilee. That's what it means. It means it was a very wealthy place. No other first century synagogue is going to be adorned that has been found anything close to the Magdala synagogue. In terms of frescoes, in terms of mosaic floors, it indicates great, great wealth there. And so, because I mean, imagine putting that in today. And by the way, it would be put in one tiny fingernail-sized tile at a time, not a sheet glued to a backing and you just throw it down, you know. It was one tile at a time. And so the enormous cost that would be involved in that. So as you're going into this, on this side of it, now here's where we're going to look. So that's that room where the Torah scrolls were housed. As you go into it here, we're going to look at the wall here. We're going to look at a wall here, and we're going to see some remnants of some of the frescoes and the painting of this particular synagogue. You can see it right here. That is, you know, the frescoes that were done were, and this is why they can last so long. And this is the real deal. And what it was the pigments, these were made out of minerals, these colors, and that's why you'll see these colors are real consistent. You saw it at Masada, in Herod's lower palace. You'll see it here as these pigments were made out of minerals, and it's embedded in the mortar, in the lime, and so it doesn't go away 2,000 years later. It's still there, and it's still pretty extraordinary. The other place that we're going to look at real quickly is a piece right here. And I'll say something about that in just a minute. So as you look at it, there you go. You can see her sitting there, and here are the two spots. This particular stone here, and of course, there is that fresco there as you enter, a little closer up at that fresco. Now that spot behind her. Take a look at this. What you'll see here, you'll see some different colors. You can see a very faded shade of blue. You can also see some more vibrant reds. These colors were not made out of minerals. They were much more expensive. Blues and reds would be made out of animal-based pigments and plant-based pigments. Well, they would not be embedded into the limestone, the mortar, and so they don't last as long, but you can get a sense there. And again, this gives us a real sense of the wealth of Magdala. You can see here, it was paved all around with these beautiful mosaics. You can see these extraordinary mosaics there, a little close-up view again of the designs. You won't see people. They were Jews. No images of people or animals, mostly very simple geometric designs like that, but this was paved the synagogue all the way around. And so, again, it just indicates that the people here were greatly wealthy. And so we move on. Now we look at this particular stone. It is really spectacular. It is kind of like the main event of the main event. Now, I think the synagogue's the main event, but for most archaeologists and all, this is the main event of the main event, is this particular stone here. They believe that it would have been the stone that the reader would have used. They would have laid the Torah, the scroll on as he read. It was very ornate, which also emphasizes the wealth of that particular community. We don't really have time to talk about the details of it, but as we think about the details, what they have come to conclude, many people have come to conclude, is that it is a representation of the temple in Jerusalem via images. You see here this menorah that is there. And they believe that this side represents entering the holy place. Up here, there's a couple of columns that they believe represents going into the Holy of Holies. This particular design here, there are this rosetta, there are 12 pieces of it, which represents, most people think, the 12 tribes of Israel, and would be the curtain that would separate the holy place from the most holy place. Down here, you have something that looks like a couple of tables with bread on top, which many scholars believe is the table of showbread. As you go to the other side, if this is the holy place on this side, that is the Holy of Holies represented there. You have a wheel, that's not one of those rosettas, and then you also have here like fire. And so you got fire and a wheel, and if you think about Ezekiel, in Ezekiel, God's throne is represented as rolling and fire. And so many people think that this is a representation of these columns all the way around it. That could be when Herod the Great just expanded the temple and beautified the temple. He had these colonnades surrounded the outer court of the temple. And so it could be a representation of the temple. It is a really spectacular piece of furniture, though. There is a replica sitting there, but it's, like I said, it's not the real thing. So as we think about this then, and we just got a few minutes left, do we ever read about Magdala in Scripture? And the answer is, I think so. I think so, but, I think so. And the reason is, after Jesus fed the 4,000 in Matthew chapter 15, he says, and sending away the crowds, Jesus got into the boat and he came to the region of Magadan. If you got the King James and you got the New King James, it says Magdala. And most scholars believe that Magadan was another name or a corruption of Magdala. What we do know is it came to a Jewish area on the west side of the Sea of Galilee, because the east side is a non-Jewish area. That's where the pig miracle happened, and we'll see that later. So we know it was a Jewish side, so it's had to be on the west, and had to be one of these ports. Nobody's ever heard of actually literally Magadan, and since this is a major port, then most scholars believe this is a reference to Magdala. And so Jesus got into a boat. He comes across the Sea of Galilee, and he disembarks here at the port of Magdala. Again, the port was down here. The harbor was down here. Jesus would have walked up here, and this road would have went straight past the synagogue, which is in this area, and the marketplace up there. So I believe that this is a reference to Jesus coming here to Magdala. But there's another reason I believe that absolutely with every ounce of my being, not only did Jesus come to Magdala, but Jesus was in this very synagogue. He stood in this synagogue and he preached the kingdom. There are two passages. First is in Matthew that tells us Jesus was going throughout all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom. Jesus went throughout all of the Galilee. He went in the synagogues. That was his mission, to go in the synagogues and announce the kingdom. You see the same thing in Mark chapter 1. And he went into their synagogues throughout all Galilee, preaching and casting out demons. Now, when you think about Magdala, that's right there. And when you think about Jesus' home base for his Galilean ministry, that's right there. That's about 5.5 miles. The Via Maris, the major road, went right along the lake there. It's about a 2-hour walk. Jesus would have always went through Magdala when he went home to Nazareth, because he would have followed that Via Maris, and it always goes through Magdala before he cut over. And so it is absolutely unthinkable, based on Matthew and Mark's description of Jesus going through all the Galilee and going in the synagogues, and not think that he came down to a 2-hour walk from his home base of his ministry to the largest city, the largest town on the Sea of Galilee, that he decided to bypass that. That's absolutely unthinkable. And so I absolutely believe with all of my being that Jesus went in this synagogue. The synagogue was there when Jesus was there, and that I believe that the Son of God stood in this synagogue and preached the gospel of the kingdom. We have here, soon after he began going around from one city and kingdom village to another. So he goes around all these villages, Luke says. Well, he's not going to bypass this one, this major village, this major town in the Galilee where he did most of his miracles. And so he's going around one city, one village to another, and he's proclaiming, he's preaching the kingdom. Also in Luke chapter 8 then, and here is where we find this city is most related. We know that Jesus was there based on the description of what he did there, that he's going to all the synagogues in the region, in the area of Galilee, which is far beyond this, but certainly here, preaching the kingdom. But we most know Galilee because of one of Jesus' most devoted disciples. And I would just almost go out on a limb and say not one of his most devoted disciples, the most devoted disciple. Now, I know that's hard to do, and I know it's hard to say. But her name was Mary, and we, of course, know her as Mary. Magdalene was not a surname. It was where she was from, Mary from Magdala, to distinguish her from other Marys. And so the 12 were with him, and also some women who had been healed of evil spirits and sickness. Mary, who was called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out. And so one of Jesus' most devoted followers was from here, lived here. She was probably a person of means because we didn't finish. I wish I would have finished the text there. It mentions some other women, and it says they supported Jesus in his ministry. And so most scholars believe that Mary Magdalene was also a woman of means. By the way, you've heard, and it was really kind of a medieval invention. There is nothing that says her conduct was lewd, that she was a prostitute and all of that. Those kind of legends evolved. What we know about her is she was just tormented by 7 demons. And we don't know what the demons did to her, but we know what demons did to people. And we see enough descriptions in the New Testament. I can't even imagine the horrors of her life and what she endured at the hands of the demonic. And so when Jesus cast those 7 demons out of her, this woman from this town here followed Jesus and helped support him in his ministry. Now, let's real quickly move because we got like 4 minutes left. So as we think about Mary from Magdala, we not only see that she was a supporter, she helped finance his ministry. But we also see that, as some people have described it, she was the last at the cross and she was the first at the tomb. And that's a pretty good description. Now, the centurion and those who were with him guarding over Jesus, when they saw the earthquake, the things that were happening, became very frightened and said, truly, this was the Son of God. Many women who were there looking on from a distance, who had followed Jesus from Galilee while ministering to him, among them was Mary Magdalene. And that's where the whole statement comes then that people make, and I think it's, again, a good one, that she was one of the last at the cross. She was there till the bitter end. And she was not going to leave Jesus. And then we get to, of course, the first day of the week, and of all of the people who were given the privilege of first seeing the resurrected Christ, Jesus gave that privilege to Mary Magdalene. And now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb while it was still dark and saw the stone already taken away from the tomb. She ran and came to Simon, Peter, and the other disciple who Jesus loved and said to them, they've taken away the Lord out of the tomb and we don't know where they've laid him. Well, we know what then happens. Mary finds her way back and she's waiting and she looks in and she's told that he's risen. The angels are there and then she hears Jesus. Jesus calls her by name and of course she is just so overwhelmed with grief and emotion. She doesn't really look at Jesus. She doesn't recognize. Her mind is completely consumed with where have they taken the body of my Lord. And it's then that he called her by name in such a way that she immediately recognized Christ. And she embraced him. And she clung to him so desperately that he said, you don't have to keep clinging to me. It's one of the more difficult passages in Scripture. It's not, and some people think it's a rebuke. I don't believe that for 2 seconds. It seems to be that the idea is, Mary, you can let go. I'm not going to the Father yet. You can let go. She wasn't about to let go. And it just reminds me of Jesus says to, the more that you recognize what God has done for you, the deeper you realize your problem that he has solved, the more grateful you are. Well, there was nobody who was more grateful, clearly, than Mary Magdalene. And when you think about 7 demons and what she must have went through, that it didn't matter. All the other disciples could flee when Jesus was taken to the cross, but she wasn't. And John was there, but she was not going to leave him. She didn't leave him at the cross, and she was the first to take. She spent a lot of her own money, obviously, to go and finish the burial process for her Lord. And Jesus gave her the privilege of seeing him for the very first time. Just a wonderful example of discipleship. And she's an inspiration. Her memory by the Holy Spirit has been preserved, and rightly so, as we need to think about the depth of what Christ has done for us. And if we really truly understood what Jesus has freed us from, we will be like Mary. We would just not want to let go of Jesus. We will cling to him until the end. Well, we're out of time. I hope you've enjoyed our visit to Magdala. Next week, we've already been to Capernaum. Next week, what we will do is we will go north of Capernaum 2 miles to the city of Chorazin. And so, Lord willing, I'll see you then. Have a great rest of the day. And Lord willing, I'll see you back tonight at 6 o'clock.